we go. We're recording in 3, 2, and 1.
My teenage brain and my 20s brain could not conceive of the fact that things could be artistic, violent, and have boobs in it all at the same time until I opened this magazine.
Ah, I know what we're talking about. Welcome to episode 153 of Nerdery Murdery.
Big 153. I'm Zig with your nerdery.
And I'm Jeffrey with your murdery. Welcome to another week. It's the highs and lows, the up, the down, the good and the bad, and the nerd and the murd. God, I almost said murdery nerdery.
Murdery, nerdery.
I almost reversed it. So I will let you take over on the nerdery side of the house. I assume we're talking about the magazine and the video game and the movie.
Yes.
Awesome. All right.
Yes.
Take it away.
We're actually talking about two magazines. The first one being Metal Hurlant, Metal Hurlant, known as heavy metal in America.
Mm-hmm.
Metal Hurlant, literally translated to howling metal or screaming metal, is a French comic anthology of science fiction and horror comic stories originally created in 1974. The anthology ceased publication in 1987, but was revived in 2002 and 2004 in multilingual editions, and then again in 2020, so it's out right now. Emphasizing complex graphics, cinematic imagery, and surreal storylines, Metal Hurlant was highly influential throughout the world as one of the first mature expressions of adult comic book making. Apart from comics, the original Metal Hurlant contains articles about science fiction books and movies, as well as music and video game reviews. Metal Hurlant, in English, Howling Metal, was created in December of 1974 by comic artist Jean Girard, better known as Mobius, and Philippe Droulet, together with journalist writer Jean-Pierre Dionnet and financial director Bernard Farkas. The four were collectively known as Les Humanoides Associés, or United Humanoids, which became the name of the publishing house releasing Metal Hurlant. Contents from Metal Hurlant were republished in English in the United States by National Lampoon under the title Heavy Metal. It was published in Germany under the title Schwermetal. Schwermetal.
Mm-hmm.
The magazine was originally released quarterly. It consisted of 68 pages, of which only 16 were in color. Contributors included Mobius and Droulet. Depictions such as characters as Arzak and Lone Sloan. Later issues featured Richard Corbin, Alejandro Jodorowsky, Inky Bilal, Kaza, Serge Clerk, Elaine Voss, Bernie Wrightson, Nicole Clairvaux, Milo Manara, Frank Mandarin, Massey, Chantal Montelier, and many others. The magazine went bankrupt in 1980, but managed to keep publishing, and it became bi-monthly with issue number 7 and monthly with number 9. Metal Hurlant ceased publication in July of 1987. Metal Hurlant began publishing again in July of 2002 by Humanoids Publishing with a French, English, Spanish, and Portuguese version under the French name as a two-headed transatlantic France-US magazine led by Fabrice Geiger in Los Angeles. It published original short stories, sometimes related to existing or to be published comic books. Its aim was to discover young creators and promote the products from the publisher. This incarnation of the magazine ceased publication with issue number 14, dated November/December of 2004. Vincent Bernier launched Metal Hurlant for 2021. The third volume of Metal Hurlant was published via crowdfunding on the Kiss Kiss Bank platform. The first issue was published 29th September with 4 issues a year, 2 with new content and 2 with classic content planned. The third issue was published in March of 2022 and included the story Aquarium by French author Leo Quevreau. A Polish edition of the relaunch magazine, overlapping with reprints of classical issues, premiered in December of 2021. So as it stands right now, Metal Hurlant is still out there. It's kind of spotty when it gets published, um, but it is still going as well, and you can actually get an English translation of Metal Hurlant. Heavy Metal, on the other hand, was an American science fiction and fantasy comic magazine published between 1977 and 2023. The magazine was known primarily for its blend of dark fantasy, science fiction, erotica, and steampunk comics. And unlike the traditional American comic books of the time, bound by the restrictive Comics Code Authority, the magazine format, Heavy Metal, featured explicit nudity, sexual situations, and graphic violence. The magazine started out primarily as a licensed translation of the French science fiction magazine, Metal Hurlant, marking for many Americans their first introduction to the work of European cartoonists like Inky Bilal, Philippe Caza, Guido Crepa, Philippe Droulet, Jean-Claude Forest, Jean Girard, aka Morbius, Chantal Montelier, and Milo Manara. After a 1975 European trip by National Lampoon's contributor Tony Hendra, he expressed interest in European comics. The magazine's New York office attracted significant European comic material. And on the 2nd of September 1976, National Lampoon's editor Sean Kelly signed out a relatively new French comic anthology, Metal Hurlant, Howling Metal, through Kelly translated it as Screaming Metal, and brought it to the attention of company president Leonard Mogul. On the 3rd of September, as Mogul was departed for Germany and France to jumpstart the French edition of National Lampoon, Metal Hurlant debuted in early 1975 from Les Humanoid Associates and the Association of Philippe Droulet, Jean-Pierre Dion, and Mobius. And financial director Bernard Farkas, formed on December of 1974. Upon Mogul's return from Paris on the 27th of September, he reported that the French publisher had agreed to an English language version, and he suggested the title Heavy Metal for an April issue to be released in March of 1977. Excuse me. Heavy Metal debuted in the U.S. as a glossy, full-color monthly publish by HM Communications Inc., a subsidiary of Matty Simon's 21st Century Communications Inc. The cover of the initial April 1977 issue declared itself to be From the People Who Brought You the National Lampoon, and the issue primarily featured reprints of Metal Hurlant, as well as material from National Lampoon's, a colorized portion of Vogbo's Sunspot, Sunpot, and an excerpt from Terry Brooks's The Swords of Shannara. Since the color pages for Metal Hurlant had already been shot in France, the budget to reproduce in the US version was greatly reduced. In 1979, HM Communications published a couple of comics format movie adaptations collected from the pages of Heavy Metal. The first was Archie Goodwin and Walt Simon's Alien, the illustrated story, distributed by Simon & Schuster. The second movie tie-in was 1941, the illustrated story by Alan Asherman, Stephen R. Bissett, and Rick Veitch, which rather than being a straight adaptation varies wildly and humorously from the film 1941, directed by Steven Spielberg, who actually wrote the book's introduction. In the late spring of 1980, Metal Hurlant went bankrupt, and Heavy Metal Communication severed its ties with its content partner. Metal Hurlant managed to keep publishing, however, and the two magazines reconciled in the summer of '81. After running as a monthly for its first 9 years up to the December 1985 issue, the magazine dropped to a quarterly schedule, winter, spring, summer, and fall, beginning in 1986, promising an increase in length and to feature only complete rather than serialized stories. Metal Hurlant folded in the summer of '87, forcing Heavy Metal to expand its reach for new content. At this point, I dropped into the story. I don't know about you, my brother, but this is where I started picking it up.
Mm-hmm.
In the late 1988, early 1989, film producer Daniel Grodnick and actor-producer Tim Matheson acquired voting control of 21.3% of National Lampoon Inc. stock. They were named to the company's board and eventually took control of the company by purchasing the 10% shares worth $760,000 of Matty Simons, who departed the company. During this period, publication of heavy metal increased from a quarterly to a bi-monthly schedule, citing a 30% increase in circulation. A year later, Grodnick Matheson Company sold the properties to J2 Communications, a home video producer and distributor founded by James P. Jamiro, with Grodnick and Matheson staying on for a period around the new division. Kevin Eastman, co-creator of Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, who had grown up reading heavy metal, bought the magazine for $500,000 in May of 1992. In total, HM Communications published 137 issues in 15 volumes from April 77 to March 1992. Eastman's publishing entity, Metal Mammoth Inc., published the magazine from 92 to 2014. Eastman also served as heavy metal's editor-in-chief for the bulk of this time, even into 2016, after he was no longer the owner. In January 2014, Eastman sold the magazine to digital and music veterans David Boxenbaum and film producer Jeffrey Kralitz. Eastman continued to serve as a publisher of the magazine until early 2020 and was a minority investor in the New Heavy Metal, which became at that point published by Heavy Metal Media, LLC. In late 2019, Kralitz was no longer with the magazine, which was undergoing leadership churn. In early 2020, Heavy Metal saw a regime change to CEO Matthew Medney and creative overlords David Irwin, formerly of DC Entertainment. Medney and Irwin announced two new comic publishing ventures, Virus and Magma Comics, though neither line produced much material. Heavy Metal's 300th issue, published in 2021, featured works by Tenino Liberatore, Mark Bode, and Ken Williams, among others. The posthumous work by Richard Corbin, Mobius, and Vaughn Bode. It had interviews and testimonials from writers discussing the impact of the magazine or the impact that it had on them as teenagers. Joseph Illich, who served as the magazine's executive editor, looked back with some pride on what the editorial team accomplished in the period of 2019 to 2022. And I quote, "What I'm proud of is being part of a team that over the last 3 years, quite frankly, took the magazine out of its spiral into invisibility and irrelevance and reinvigorated it with some of the best artists and writers in comics, returned Heavy Metal to a monthly publication schedule, and revitalized the staff with new voices, vibrant energy, and new ideas. We opened the doors to women, queer creators, and American creators of color who followed the lead of the seminal 1981 animated film and made the character of Tarna the flagship character of the company in publishing, treating her like our Batman and elevating her with creative minds." However, in the fall of 2022, the magazine entered an agreement with online marketplace Whatnot to publish the following 12 issues of the magazine. And soon afterward, the magazine announced it was ceasing publication on what they described as the first volume of the magazine, which had been published continuously since 1977. The last issue of the first volume, number 320, was scheduled for publication in late October 2022, and the successor, volume 2, would be published by Whatnot Publishing, starting with issue 1 in February of 2023. Amid cash flow problems, however, Heavy Metal shut down in December of 2022, initially intended to be a temporary suspension. The magazine worked to rectify subscription, non-fulfillments, and non-payments to artists and vendors. Medney stepped down as CEO, replaced by Marshall Lease and Jamie Penrose. In July of 2023, with Whatnot's publishing division, Massive Publishing, only having produced one issue of Heavy Metal, number 320, released in April of that year, it was announced that the publisher decided to cancel the magazine, and then that 320 had been the final issue. Writer R.M. Rhodes had this to say about the long-running magazine's ignominious end: "It is entirely possible that Heavy Metal could surprise observers by releasing another issue, but they have no staff, no publishers, no partners, no credibility, no money, and an alienated audience. It certainly feels like the end. It would be very easy for Heavy Metal to prove me wrong, but I feel confident stating the magazine has ceased publication. I just wish the company would bother to say something to that effect." Heavy Metal's high-quality artwork was notable work by international fine artists such as H.R. Geiger, Franz Frazetta, and Esteban Maroto. Were featured on the covers of various issues. Stefano Tamburini and Tano's Liberatore's Ran Xerox series debuted in the States. Terence Lindell's illustrated version of Milton's epic poem Paradise Lost appeared in the magazine in 1980. Many stories were present as long-running serials, such as those by Richard Corbin, Pepe Marino, and Matt Howarth. Illustrators like Louis Royo and Alex Ebel contributed artwork over the course of their careers. An adaptation of the film Alien, named Alien, the illustrated story, which Archie Goodwin had drawn with Walter Simonton, which we mentioned before, was published in the magazine in 1979. So let's talk about the magazine for a minute, since I gave all of that long exposition. um, I don't know how to describe this other than it's violent, it's sexy, it's brilliant, um, it's beautiful, it's amazing.
Hmm.
I mean, what would you say about the magazine itself?
Um, heavy metal is a nerd's heaven.
God, yes.
Because you're gonna have everything from fantasy, horror, science fiction, sword and sorcery, apocalyptic worlds, post-apocalyptic worlds, and whatnot. It's amazing. Heavy metal was so great. I loved when the movie came out. Um, there was a second movie that came out. There were a couple of video games that came out based on Heavy Metal Fac 1 and Fac 2. And then even as much as recent, um, the I'm looking for words here, but the effect of heavy metal is seen in uh, what is the name of it? Sex, Love, and Robots.
Yeah,
Yeah, that one, which has 2 seasons as far as I'm aware. Fascinating. I mean, it's great. I love heavy metal. Absolutely love heavy metal, especially the movie. Love the music in it. The animation is just beautiful. I love it.
it is incredible. It is wonderful. We're going to talk about the movie too. I also want to talk about the series that they came out with on Sci-Fi about 10 years ago. Um, it wasn't called Heavy Metal. It was called Metal Hurlant Chronicles. They did 2 seasons. Uh, it was also really good. But yeah, just going back to the magazine. Every publishing nerdy name you can think of, including Otter from Animal House, had something to do with
Hmm.
this. Well, and the voice of Johnny Quest. Can't forget that. But yeah, that magazine was just incredible. And again, Metal Hurlant is out in English, so you can pick it up. So heavy metal hasn't stopped. Just that iteration of it. And I seriously doubt that we don't see another one in the next couple of years. I mean, the last one was published in about a year ago. I fully expect to see another one crop up pretty soon. But yeah, I want to talk about Metal Hurlant Chronicles first, just because people may not know about it. It is an English language Franco-Belgian television science fiction anthology series based around the popular comic anthology magazine Metal Hurlant, known in the United States as Heavy Metal. Each episode is a self-contained story taking place on a different planet with a different cast. And the episodes are linked together only by the idea that an asteroid or the Metal Hurlant passes the planet in question during the events of the story, much like the Lochnar in the movie.
Hmm.
The show's premises originated with Guillaume Lobrano, who put together a self-financed pilot to pitch the show, which was broadcast as the series' third episode. Lobrano and Justine Vallot produced the show through their company WE Productions, and it was largely filmed in Bucharest, Romania, so it has kind of an old world feel to it. The series was premiered on French television on 27th of October 2012 on France 4. Broadcast rights for various European countries such as Germany, Austria, and Luxembourg were bought by Sony Pictures Television. And as an anthology series, each episode is a self-contained science fiction story taking place in a different world, with different characters played by a different cast and adapted from a story previously published in Metal Hurlant magazine. However, the show also proposes that all the stories are linked together by the asteroid called Metal Hurlant, which is passing close to the planet where the episode's story is taking place. The opening credits, narrated in French by voice actor Benoit Allemand, informed that the metal Hurlant, or screaming metal, is the last fragment of what was once a living planet, led to destruction by the madness of its inhabitants and condemned to travel ceaselessly through space and time, screaming its sadness and despair, which is so French and cool. After being initially expected by early 2012, all 6 episodes of season 1 were broadcast on France 4 in the late night time slot over the course of 2 nights. In either default dubbed French or optional subtitle original English audio tracks between 27 of October and the 3rd of November for the same year. No Life was expected to rebroadcast season 1 in France sometime in 2013. Sony Pictures Television has bought the broadcast rights for several European countries where it was at least aired on Animax in Germany, Austria, and Switzerland. Sci-Fi Channel began airing the first season of the series in the U.S. on the 14th of April 2014 on Mondays at 8 and 8:30 p.m. with various repeats during the following week. I believe we got 2 seasons of Metal Hurlant, maybe 3. It was really good, but yeah, all the stories actually did kind of tie together. Some of the characters would crop back up from one story to the other. That was a really, really good one. I really enjoyed Metal Hurlant. A lot of Canadian actors too, as well. And you could watch it in English or French, which was what was cool about it. I believe that you can pick it up because it aired on Sci-Fi. I think you can watch it on, is that Paramount or Peacock? One of those has Sci-Fi Channel stuff and it has Metal Hurlant. It's a good anthology series. I would encourage anyone to watch it. Heavy Metal is a 1981 Canadian adult animation science fiction anthology film directed by Gerald Potterton and produced by Ivan Reitman and Leonard Morgul, who also is the publisher of Heavy Metal magazine, which was the basis for the film. It starred the voices of Roger Bumpus, Jackie Burroughs, John Candy, Joe Flaherty, Don Franks, Martin Levitt, Marilyn Lighthouse, Eugene Levy, Alice Playton, Harold Ramis, Percy Rodriguez, Susan Roman, Richmond Romanus, August Schellenberg, John Vernon, and Zal Yanofsky. The screenplay was written by Daniel Goldberg and Lee Blum.
Harold Ramis, great Nyborg, man.
I'm so glad you said it because I was about to.
Great Nyborg,
man, this is great Nyborg, man. It's space cocaine. The film,
and they do a lot of it.
Yeah, they come out with like a hand truck full of it, and they just snort it up off the floor. Piles. The film is an anthology of various science fiction and fantasy stories tied together by a single theme of an evil force that is the sum of all evils. It was adapted from Heavy Metal magazine and original stories in the same spirit. Like the magazine, the film features a great deal of graphic violence, sexuality, and nudity, and drug use. Smoking, drinking, zombies. Its production was expedited by having several animation houses working simultaneously on different segments, which is why they look different, which is why this movie works so fucking well. Upon release, the film received mixed reviews from critics, with praise towards the animation, visuals, Elmer Bernstein's score, and voice acting, but criticism towards its story and overuse of graphic violence. The film, however, was a modest success at the box office and has since achieved cult status. The film's influential soundtrack was packaged by music manager Irving Azoff and included several popular rock bands and artists, including Black Sabbath, Blue Oyster Cult, Sammy Hagar, Don Felder, Cheap Trick, Devo, Journey, and Nazareth, among others. That was also the problem. For a long time, unless you had, what was it, Cinemax, and you caught it late at night, because they didn't air it all the time, and recorded it, you could not get a copy of this movie because of the music. They had a hard time getting the rights to releasing it on video, and it was probably 20 years before you could finally get it. I want to say before they released the second movie, Fact 2 or Heavy Metal 2000, which was released in 2000, um, you could not get a copy of Heavy Metal on VHS or DVD unless you bought it. Um, unless you bought it in French with subtitles. That was the only other way you could get it done. And you know, I like listening to French people, but you don't get any of those voices. Um, the title sequence is based on the comic of the same name by Dan O'Banion and Thomas Wartkin. The title sequence story opens with a space shuttle orbiting the. Oh wait, yeah, the bay doors open, releasing a 1960 Corvette. An astronaut seated in the car then begins descending through Earth's atmosphere, landing in a desert canyon. Amazing, amazing. In the framing story, the astronaut Grimaldi arrives at his home where he's greeted by his daughter. He says he has something to show her. When he opens the case, a green crystalline sphere rises out and melts him. It introduces itself to the terrified girl as the sum of all evils. Looking into the orb known as the Lochnar, the girl sees how it has influenced societies throughout time and space. The next story, and I'm just going to kind of play these out a little bit, if that's okay.
Okay.
Um, it's called Harry Canyon. It's a dystopian and crime-ridden New York City in 2031 with a cynical cab driver named Harry Canyon, and he narrates his day in film noir style. What is amazing about Harry Canyon and Grimaldi, which is the framing story, the animation's completely different. The next one is Den. It's based on the character of the same name created by Richard Corbin. A nerdy teenager finds a green meteorite near his house and adds it to his rock collection. During a lightning experiment, the orb hurls the young man into the world of Neverwhere, where he transforms into a naked, muscular man called Den. I can't go walking around here with my dork hanging out. Um, but it's an acronym of his Earth name, David Ellis Norman, voiced wonderfully by John Candy.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a barbarian piece. Den is just whacking through people and with swords and half naked women and all naked women, and just it's amazing. It is awesome. And Den has been around. Den was in heavy metal quite a bit. There's several Den stories. I want to say they eventually put them all into a book. You can actually get a Den story. And the next story is Captain Stern. On a space station, crooked space captain Lincoln F. Stern is on trial for numerous serial charges presented by the prosecutor, consisting of 12 counts of murder in the first degree, 14 counts of armed theft of Federation property, 22 counts of piracy in high space, 18 counts of fraud, 37 counts of rape, and one moving violation, pleading not guilty against the advice of his lawyer. Stern explains he's expecting to be acquitted because he bribed a witness named Hanover Fist. Fist takes a little marble out of his pocket, and it turns out to be the Lochnar, and he turns into this giant hulking creature and tears through the spaceship. Oh my god, it's so funny. So funny. The next one is called Neverwhere Land, but there were some time constraints on it. It should have connected Captain Stern to a B-17. But the story does follow the influence of the Lochnar upon the evolution of a planet, from the Lochnar landing in a body of water, influencing the rise of an industrial age and a world war. The original story was created by Cornelius Cole. The original rough animations are set in a loop beginning for Pink Floyd's Time. And the 1996 VHS release included the segments at the end of the tape. On the DVD release, the segment is included as a bonus feature in both release versions. Oh, I guess you could get it in 1996. That's
Yeah.
right. Just a couple of years before they released it.
And this particular one, while it's not my favorite of the stories, I think this one is the most beautifully done.
Oh yeah, yeah, and then you get the B-17 with the World War II
Yeah.
B-17 bomber.
That's
Nicknamed
that's the one I'm talking about.
the
The story
B-17
with
one?
the B-17, yes.
Yeah. There was actually one that they were supposed to be in between Hanover Fist.
Gotcha.
Sorry, Captain Stern and B-17 called Nowhere Land. If you've got the tapes or the DVD, you can actually see it. But yeah, this bomber basically goes down on this island, and the Lochnar rams itself into the plane and reanimates the dead crew members as zombies. And this one guy's trying to run away, and all of these wrecked airplanes are zombified airmen. Um, oh my god, it's beautiful, and it's all rotoscoped. It's dark and beautiful. Um, so the next one, Dr. Anrak, a prominent scientist, arrives at the Pentagon for a meeting regarding mysterious mutations that are plaguing the United States. At the meeting, the doctor tries to dismiss the occurrences when he sees the Lochnar and the Locket of Gloria, a beautiful, buxom stenographer. He begins to behave erratically and motorboats her. A colossal starship drills through the roof and abducts the doctor and, by accident, Gloria. The ship's robot is irritated at Anrak, who is actually a malfunctioning android, but its mood changes when he sees Gloria. With the help of the ship's alien pilot Edsel and co-pilot Zeke, the robot convinces Gloria to stay on board and have robot sex, albeit off-screen. At this point, Edsel and Zeke snort a huge amount of a powder drug called plutonium Nyborg before flying home. Oh my god, it's hysterical. So funny. That's Harold Ramis, um, and Eugene Levy are the
Mm-hmm.
the pilots. Lochnar. It's so funny. God, I love that. And the last story, which is the tie-in story, the Lochnar, now the size of a giant meteor, crashes into a volcano on another world and draws a large mass of curious people. As they begin to climb the volcano, it erupts and green slime covers the crowd, mutating them into an evil barbarian army. The mutants subsequently attack a nearby city of peaceful scholars. Desperate, the city leaders mentally summon the Terrakians, a once powerful yet now declining warrior race with whom the city had a pact. But the city falls before the call can be answered. Tarna, a beautiful yet mute warrior and last of the Terrakians, receives a summons, and after ritually preparing herself, she and her avian mount fly to the beleaguered city, only to find the citizens dead. She goes to avenge them. Um, Tarna is tortured and thrown into an open pit, unconscious. Her mount escapes and rescues her. She tries going for the Lochnar, but the mutants pursue her and shoot her mount down. The mutant leader faces Tarna in a duel to the death, wounding her, but Tarna manages to kill him. With the last of their strength, Tarna and her companion make a death flight to the volcano. As they approach, the Lochnar warns her off. Claiming that sacrificing herself would be futile, ignoring the Lochnar, Tarna unleashes the power imbued in her sword and dives into the volcano, destroying the Lochnar. So after the final story, the Lochnar that was terrorizing the little girl destabilizes and begins to break up. The girl flees it and her home. The Lochnar then explodes, destroying the mansion in the process. That little girl is reborn into Tarna the Terrakian, and it's amazing.
Mm-hmm.
I love that bit. The original film is so wonderful, and again, um, it was so sought after for so long because again, it was released in '81. It was in theaters for 3 to 6 months, and then it was gone. But you could, unless you had Cinemax, or was it the movie channel?
I seem to remember Cinemax.
Yeah, and you had to know
Because
somebody
no,
who had it.
I never had the movie channel, so it must have been Cinemax.
Yeah, and record it. That's how, and it got passed around, and people would make recordings of recordings of recordings, and they were terrible copies. But that's the only way you could get this movie for 15, 16 years. That's right. They did release it before Heavy Metal 2000 came out. Um,
Yeah, I have it on DVD in the metal case.
yes, it's really good. It's really really good. Um, the next thing we want to talk about, or the final thing we're going to talk about, is Heavy Metal 2000, also known as Heavy Metal Fact 2, outside of North America, is a 2000 Canadian adult animated science fiction film produced by Jacques Pettigrew and Michael Lemire and directed by Michael Coldway and Lemire, starring the voices of Michael Ironside, Julie Strain, and Billy Idol. The film is a follow up to the 1981 animated cult film Heavy Metal, which is based on the fantasy magazine of the same name. The story is based on the graphic novel The Melting Pot, written by Kevin Eastman, Simon Bisley, and Eric Talbot. The film was made by Cinegroup, a studio based in Montreal, Quebec, and I'm sorry, Montreal, Quebec. It receives negative reviews on Rotten Tomatoes. Um, in ages past, the Arcacians, a malevolent race, discovered a place where space-time leaked a type of fluid. This fluid granted immortality to anyone who consumed it. The Araxians built an empire and enslaved the known universe for centuries. They were finally vanquished after the fountain chamber, where they gathered the water of life, was sealed by freedom fighters. The key to the chamber, a glowing crystal that can lead the bearer back to the fountain and drive anyone who possesses it insane, was cast into space and lost among the stars. These dudes are mining an asteroid, and space crewman Tyler and his colleagues find the key by accident. Tyler touches the key and instantly goes insane, much like the mutants in the Terrakian story. They just start killing. His search for the planet with the fountain leads to Eden, a planet that's designated FAC2, Federation assigned ketogenic kill zone, but it has inhabitants whose bodies carry the immortality fluid. Tyler invades Eden and kills many of the Edenites, capturing some of his own so he can extract the immortality fluid from their bodies. He also keeps the attractive Carrie for his own sexual purposes. When Germaine resists the idea, he is left on Eden. Carrie's sister Julie survives the attack and teams up with Germaine to follow Tyler. At a renegade space station, Julie finds Tyler and critically injures him. However, he ingests a vial with the immortality serum and heals instantly. There's an ensuing gunfight and several other things going on. I like Fact 2. I always thought Fact 2 was really cool. It did kind of bother me that it was just one story instead of several stories tied together. What do you think about Fact 2?
I wasn't as big a fan of Fact 2. I love the video game, um, but I no, I'm not as big of a fan of the movie itself. I watched it only once, and I struggled getting through it.
I've seen it several times. It's pretty cool. The animation is incredible. Um, but after the release of 2000, a third film has been in various stages of development since then. During 2008 and into 2009, reports circulated that David Fincher and James Cameron would executive produce and each direct one of the 8 of 9 segments of the new film based on heavy metal. Eastman also wanted to direct a segment, as well as animator Tim Miller, with Zack Snyder, Gore Verbinski, and Guillermo del Toro attached direct segments. However, Paramount Pictures decided to stop funding the film by August of 2009, and no distributor or production company has showed interest in this second sequel since. In 2011, at Comic-Con, Robert Rodriguez announced that he would purchase the film rights to Heavy Metal and planned to develop a new animation film for his new Quick Draw Studios. However, on March 11th, 2014, with the formation of his very own television network, El Rey, Rodriguez considered switching gears and bringing it to TV. Fincher and Miller subsequently developed their plans into Love, Death, and Robots, an original animated series of Netflix initially released in 2019. So the reason Love, Death, and Robots feels like heavy metal is because David Fincher and Tim Miller
Right.
were writing a heavy metal.
I wonder if they're going to do a new season of Love, Death, and Robots. There's 3 out currently.
Yes, and they're all exceptional. Love,
Yes.
Death, and Robots is great. Love, Death, and Robots feels like heavy metal too.
Mm-hmm.
I would also say there's a, I believe it's on Amazon or Freevee or something like that.
Netflix.
Yeah, Love, Death, and Robots is on
Netflix.
Yeah, is on Netflix. It is great. You should go out and check it out if you like any of this stuff. There's also one of the same vein called The Stories of Philip K. Dick, or From the Mind of Philip K. Dick. They only did one season of it. It is incredible. You should check it out.
Yeah, that is absolutely incredible. I love that.
Yeah. Also has a very heavy metal feel to it, but it's all live action.
Love, Death, and Robots has been renewed for a fourth season.
Nice. Um, there's some really beautiful things there, and you see a lot of that stuff creep up on TikTok too. Just little bits of it, especially the robots walking through the ruined um, humanity. God, love all of this stuff. But that basically is it for heavy metal slash metal Hurlant. I'm sorry that one was really long, but there's a lot of ground to cover. Um, kids, there are new comics being produced all the time. There are reprints. This stuff can be picked up cheaply, um, and efficiently. Go out and check it out.
Hmm.
Um, it's life changingly cool for nerds.
Well, and
Artwork,
I mean, and for my say on it, definitely watch the movie Heavy Metal. I
yeah,
don't as much recommend Heavy Metal 2000, but definitely watch Heavy Metal. Definitely watch Love, Death, and Robots.
yes.
Those are phenomenal, phenomenal, awesome. Well, thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
With that, we will take over on the murdery side of the house.
Murder.
For today, I got my information off the Village Voice, Medium, Wikipedia, and the Daily Star, and this is the murder of Monica Beerle.
Monica
I
Beerle.
think it's Beerle, it may be Beerley. I'm not sure on that. Um, this is really, I mean, it's about her murder, but Daniel Paul Rakowitz was the murderer. He's an American murderer and possible cannibal. The murder of Monica and the vicious nature of her killer, Daniel, sent shockwaves across New York City and disturbed many residents of the Lower East Side for years. The drug crazed, once homeless Daniel Rakowitz was known as the marijuana guru when he murdered Monica for mysterious reasons. Many residents of the Lower East Side were traumatized for years when Daniel Rakowitz was arrested and charged with second-degree murder in connection with the death of Monica Beerle in August 1989. Locals who knew him before his arrest were interviewed by police, and their testimony strengthened the case against him. And despite Daniel's mental health plea, forensics evidence connected him to the murder of Monica. Many concerns remain unanswered after he was condemned to 25 years to life in jail and removed permanently from the Lower East Side. Daniel's father was an Army homicide detective, and so the family moved frequently. And he was born in Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri, in 1960. I've been there. At some point in the late 1970s, the Rockowitzes uprooted their lives and settled in Rockport, Texas. Daniel attended and graduated from high school in Refugio, Texas, despite widespread belief that he attended and graduated from Rockport Fulton High School in 1980. Around 1985, he was uprooted to the Big Apple. Daniel was an oddball who started his own church, the Church of 966, and is well
I'm
known,
sorry.
the Church of 966.
966. Got it. Okay. Thank you.
And he was well known in the East Village because he sold marijuana and kept a rooster as a pet. He had a rough upbringing full of poverty, drug abuse, and emotional problems. His parents' drug addiction made them absent from his life, and by the time he was in his late teens, he was living on the streets of Manhattan's Lower East Side. The locals who visited the area's pubs and clubs at the time knew him as the marijuana guru due to his interest in marijuana production. Um, his landlady revealed he would often ramble about his bizarre beliefs, telling her, quote, I am the Lord of Lords, and by 1992, my followers are going to take over. And if they think Hitler was something, they haven't seen anything yet.
Huh.
His victim, Monica Beerle, a 26-year-old dancer from Switzerland, was raised in the city of St. Gallen. Monica came to the city with big plans on starting her dancing career. She received a certificate for teaching choreography from the Juice Leader School of Dance at Darrington Hall in Devon. Monica was known as an energetic young woman who was intent on pushing her life and art to the highest limit. In 1985, after receiving a scholarship from the Swiss government, Monica moved to New York City, where she attended the Martha Graham School of Contemporary Dance.
Oh shit.
Martha Graham, Twyla, sorry.
Hmm.
Um, Monica had to move back to Switzerland in 1987 to tend to her ill mother and do a tour of her own dance routines by touring 8 different cities. Monica started dancing at go-go bars on Times Square to make a living. And among the places she danced was Billy's Topless, located on 24th Street in New York's Chelsea neighborhood. Billy's Topless looked more like a bar than a strip club. The bar building contained a small bar and a little over 20 chairs that surrounded a stage. Monica was able to stay financially stable as a result of the money she earned from dancing at Billy's. And in the summer of 1989, Monica lived at 171 Avenue B after leaving her old apartment at 93 Orchard Street. She met Daniel Rockowitz, who was a traveling hippie, marijuana enthusiast, and part time drug dealer from Edna, Texas. That's what he said. At the time, Daniel had begun staying at 700 East 9th Street, a few miles away from where Monica lived. He earned money as a dishwasher and worked odd jobs. On the front door to his apartment was written, "Welcome to the Charlie Gein Ranch East," which was a combination of the names Ed Gein and Charlie Manson, which he fashioned himself to be. When Monica and Daniel met, they smoked a blunt and discussed about living in the city as Monica was looking for a bigger place. Daniel suggested that they moved into the apartment with him, and that others also lived there as it was affordable and could provide her with the space she needed. She accepted, and they celebrated over a few more joints. Monica paid off Daniel's back rent so he wouldn't get thrown out of the apartment. Whenever Daniel earned some money, he would go to the slaughterhouse and buy chickens, most times 20 at a time. He would slaughter them and cook them in a soup, and then he would take what he cooked and pass it out to the homeless people at Tompkins Square Park. If he had no money, he would go to a nearby supermarket and ask for change and use that to buy ingredients for food. Daniel knew what it was like to be homeless, and although it wasn't a place to rest their heads, the inhabitants of Tent City appreciated his kind gesture. In the first week of 1989, Monica moved into the apartment. A woman named Sylvia, who also lived in the apartment, confirmed that Daniel prepared the apartment for Monica's arrival in a way she hadn't seen before. Daniel had cleaned the apartment so that her arrival was comfortable as possible. She also confirmed that Daniel and Monica had at one point been involved in a sexual relationship. She said she'd come home one day to see find the front door locked, and after knocking for a while, Daniel opened the door while adjusting his zipper and saying he'd been busy. He went on to introduce Sylvia to Monica, explaining that she would be moving in and taking over the lease. And the next day, Sylvia and Monica had a conversation where Sylvia decided to ask Monica about her and Daniel's relationship. However, from Monica's response, Sylvia concluded that she wasn't in love with Daniel. The pair had a sexual relationship that lasted a few weeks, and during that time, Sylvia kept telling Daniel that Monica did not love him and just wanted to take over the apartment since the rental was now under her name. Daniel was in denial, and he responded defensively, saying that Monica cared about him. However, reality soon dawned on Daniel when Monica broke off the sexual part of the relationship and began inviting other men to the apartment. I think this is probably some of the keys. Daniel was especially enraged on one occasion when she invited a Jamaican man to spend the night with her. He kept complaining about the fact that Monica had a black man in the apartment. This was because Daniel had a distaste for anyone who wasn't white and anyone who was gay. And even though he would be seen relating with them, he considered anyone who wasn't white inferior to him. He often ranted about being white and even began his own religion, which he called the Church of 966. He also talked about animal sacrifice and was believed to have decapitated his dog at some point in the past. There was a local resident named Jerry who told the Village Voice back in 1989, quote, "Daniel liked to kill animals. He killed his pets constantly. I saw him go through a lot of cats, and he had like 3 dogs that he's killed."
Hmm.
He confessed to being placed in psychiatric wards at a young age and forced to take Ritalin from the ages of 9 to 11. And according to him, he had been bullied by other kids, and if he defended himself, he would be beaten. He would be beaten by his father. With time, Daniel began to act in a strange manner, and Monica's friends urged her to throw him out of the apartment as he was mumbling about the government and about being God. Also, having Church of 966 written on the walls in chicken's blood made them feel very uncomfortable. Daniel pleaded with Monica not to throw him out, but her mind was already made up. Daniel had begun to grasp this reality, and his worst fears of being homeless again began to creep into his head, so he decided to kill her. Others who lived in the apartment didn't take his statements about killing Monica to heart as a result of his incessant rantings. And Sylvia recalled, quote, Daniel would go through this all day long. He'd say, I'm going to kill her. And then 5 minutes later, he'd say, no, I love her. I'm not going to kill her. On August 12th, 1989, Sylvia told Monica what Daniel had been saying. And upon hearing about his plans for her, she laughed and walked up to Daniel in front of Sylvia, saying she would kill him first. About a week later, while Daniel had been walking Sylvia to a nearby PATH train, he informed her that he was going to kill Monica the next day and that he needed her to come help him dispose of the body. Sylvia told him she wasn't interested and that he was crazy for even considering such a thing. Sylvia returned back to the city that Saturday to find the lights in Monica's room had been turned off, and she had sensed something was off since there was usually someone always at home. When she went upstairs, she found that Daniel's TV was on with the volume at full blast. She opened the door and she could see Daniel's TV on the kitchen counter. She checked the old room to ensure her belongings were in good shape, but noticed that the door to Monica's room was closed. She knocked but received no response, so she went back to the kitchen and noticed a big pot on the stove. In the pot was the head of Monica.
Oh my God!
Yep, the head was burnt and her eyes were shut. She was shocked by this and she made her way to the bathroom where she found Monica's rib cage lying in the bathtub with all the skin and flesh torn from the bones surrounding the upper torso where Monica's guts were submerged in her own blood. Sylvia was alarmed by this and immediately she left the apartment and ran to a nearby phone booth on Avenue A where she did what, ladies and gentlemen? What did she do?
Called the police.
No, she called Daniel. She did not call the police. She called Daniel. He had to return her call and she asked if he had actually killed Monica, and he responded apologizing, saying she had to see the body and saying that he had to do it. She met him at Tompkin Park, where he continued to apologize for what she had seen, and Sylvia, sympathetic to Daniel's tough upbringing, swore to him she'd never tell on him. That's why she didn't call the police. Whether or not you agree with her,
Okay.
yeah, I know.
Yeah.
Daniel also went further to tell her that he hadn't committed the crime alone. He was with a friend from a satanic church in the Brooklyn section of New York. Monica had told him that he had to leave the apartment by the next day and that if he refused to leave, her friend with a pit bull would be arriving to ensure that he did. When Monica went into the room, his friend asked why he hadn't killed her yet, which pissed off Monica, and she stormed out of the room and began yelling at his friend. She said she wasn't fond of Daniel or the company he kept. And as she walked away, turning her back towards the bedroom, Daniel grabbed an extension cord and wrapped it around her neck, violently pulling her towards him and then grabbing her by the throat with his bare hands. He began to strangle her until her body became lifeless. She did try to fight him off, and she scratched him up and down his arms, but he was too strong for her. And after strangling Monica to death, he stomped her head about 10 times, stabbed her 30 more times, and he cut off her head, arms, and legs. He left her remains in the blood-soaked tub while he figured out what to do next. He used a solid steel pole to break her bones, followed by a 13-inch carving knife, which he used to cut up her body into small pieces. And afterwards, he began flushing her remains down the toilet and saved some in the fridge. He began consuming parts of her over the next 10 days. But with time, Monica's remains began to decompose as a result of the late summer heat, and it prompted Dana to begin removing the rest of the skin and flesh from the body, and he also began bleaching her bones and skull to rid it of any lingering odor. Rumors then began to circulate that Daniel had boiled Monica's head and flesh, which he made into soup and then passed out to the homeless people in Tompkins Square Park.
It was people soup.
Yes. He told Sylvia, who by this time hadn't said anything out of fear that he would be cleaning up the scene so that she could return home one day for a visit. When she dropped by, Monica's skull was still in the apartment, this time resembling that of an anatomical skull used in classrooms. And whenever he recalled Monica and get angry, he would spit on her skull and say, quote, well, hey, bitch, at least you have a home. She looks more beautiful now than she ever did. He cleaned the apartment thoroughly and disposed of all the evidence, and Daniel took a bucket containing Monica's skull, bones, and kitty litter to absorb any lingering smell. And then the bucket was then transported to the baggage check facility at the Port Authority bus terminal, where he placed it in a storage locker where nobody would ever find it. After a month, authorities began pursuing leads on Monica's disappearance since she hadn't been appearing for classes and hadn't been returning any calls from home. On top of this, Daniel had been talking about Monica's brutal murder and dismemberment to anyone who cared to listen. I know these stories were confirmed when a man who lived in Tompkins Square Park testified that when eating the soup, he found a knuckle floating among the vegetables and potatoes. Daniel also confirmed that he had tasted her brain and that it tasted, quote, pretty good. On Monday, September
Oh
8th,
no.
yeah,
Yeah, well, it's just, if a human being consumes the brain of another human being, it causes it's a prion disease.
hmm, did
Yeah,
not know that.
it's we're not. Yeah, one of the reasons why we have such an aversion to eating each other is because it can make us really sick.
Hmm.
Some sort of shakes or something. Anyway.
On Monday, September 18th, detectives visited the home on 9th Street and found Sylvia there. They told her they knew what had happened from a neighbor and from another member of the household, who was a man named Sean. This was a lie, though, and it was a tactic used to withdraw information from Sylvia, who told them everything they wanted to know. Sylvia said, quote, I was tricked into it. I was told that they were going to lock him up anyway, and they already knew what had happened, and I believed it, so I told them, and 5 hours later, they picked up Daniel. He confessed. And he had no choice. Daniel Rakowicz was finally captured and charged with the murder of Monica after he fled the site of the crime. After his arrest, Daniel led police to the Port Authority baggage storage room where he had still been keeping Monica's skull and bones in a bucket. Many people on the Lower East Side who knew him prior to his arrest were interviewed by police as part of the inquiry. People testified to the horror at what he had done, and others recalled accounts of his increasingly erratic conduct in the days preceding up to that night. Daniel enjoyed being in the spotlight throughout the dramatic trial, which drew similarities to Charles Manson due to his disheveled look and messianic musings. He and his lawyer got into a heated argument during which he claimed that marijuana would rescue humanity and threatened to urinate on the prosecutor. The prosecution's case against Daniel relied heavily on testimony from individuals who knew him before he committed the murder. People testified about his unusual conduct, notwithstanding any mental health concerns, or excuse me, such as roaming around naked or babbling incoherently. And there was little question that Daniel, notwithstanding any mental health concerns may have been experienced at the time, was responsible for Monica's murder since forensics evidence connected him back through traces of Monica's blood found on his clothes leading up to her death. Daniel Rakowicz was ruled not guilty by reason of insanity on February 22nd, 1991, for the August 1989 murder of Monica Beerle by a New York jury. In 2000,
I don't doubt that they found him insane.
oh yeah, yeah. In 2004, a jury determined that Daniel posed no threat to society, but nevertheless needed to be institutionalized at the Kirby Forensic Psychiatric Center on Ward's Island in New York City due to his mental illness. And Daniel does remain there to this day. That friend he mentioned earlier on, who was a man by the name of Randy Charles Easterday, was arrested on February 1992 for taking part in the murder. He was, however, released shortly after the district attorney didn't have enough evidence to hold him. This crime's notoriety caused shockwaves throughout New York City, and though this wasn't the first time that violence had occurred in that neighborhood, locals felt especially at risk after the incident because it was so close to home and involved someone they knew personally rather than an external force or stranger from so far away. You know, as we go through these tragedies like these serve as a very sobering reminder that we must always be on our guard against danger, whether it comes from within or without our own communities. And we have to learn from these lessons in order to keep each other safe. Know your history because it will save you. It will keep us from repeating the same mistakes over and over and
Yes.
over again.
Yes, and not all local weirdos are good weirdos.
No. And that's the story of the murder of Monica Beerle.
Well, thank you for that, sir. That was fascinating.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Thanks for taking that journey with me. That will take us to the end of another recording week. As always, you can find more information about us on nerderymurdery.com. That's our hub for everything we talk about here. You can find pictures from what we talked about, as well as links from the information we. I hiccuped. I'm so sorry.
You're good.
Links from the information we talked about. You can also find the link to our YouTube page, which Zig so often updates.
Yes, and there are episodes of Metal Hurlant as well as explanations of heavy metal and scenes from the movie or both the movies, um, as well as some other stuff.
Outstanding. Thank you. You can also find the link to our merchandise page, where if you wish to show off your nerdery murdery fandom, please do consider purchasing something for there. You'll also find the link to our Patreon, where our merchandise as well as our patrons do help to keep us going, because there are costs that are associated with the show, costs that are associated with keeping us on the air, our website, publishing, and everything like that. So please do consider one of those avenues if you so like the show to help us with the costs that are ongoing with the show.
Please and thank you.
Please and thank you. We appreciate each and every one of you. Last but not least, please don't forget to leave a 5-star review wherever you can. It really helps us and helps others find our content that may be looking for the information we're talking about. So with that,
I have been Zig with your nerdery.
and I'm Jeffrey with your murdery.
Cue the music.